Hello everyone, I'm making this video to discuss the concept of deserving. Deserving is a very interesting concept. It's a very interesting mental conditioning. It's a very interesting story. It's a story that we tell ourselves that usually is hurtful. Usually it's more about we don't deserve, but even if sometimes it's about we deserve. But what deserving means? So deserve is similar to the idea of should. So usually it's like things should have been like this, things should have been like that, this should have happened, this should haven't happened. Kind of again the idea of comparing reality with some hypothetical, with some imagined reality, some imagination, some story. But in the case of deserving, it's a little bit more complicated. So because it has two parts, it's more like should is just in general. Should is like I shouldn't have broken my leg. Something is wrong with me breaking my leg. But deserving, it has kind of a precondition. So it's like if this happened, then this should happen. So people that do this should get this. People that don't do this should not get that. So it has the precondition element. So the thing that should happen so that one qualifies for deserving, so that one qualifies for the should. Now, of course, the idea of deserving is purely imagination. It's not something that exists in reality. It's not something that we can touch, that we can observe. It's a story. And it's based on some hypotheticals, on some belief that if certain things were to happen, then other things should happen. So if I work hard, I should become rich. If I am loyal, then this should happen. If I am disloyal, then this should happen. If I put effort, this should happen. Now, there is a funny joke that I will say. I read it on some book a long time ago, and I think it's really beautiful, and it really exemplifies perfectly the idea of deserving in a funny way. And it's this. It's like a plane flies because it deserves to fly. Of course, realize that this is completely ridiculous. But when it applies to us or to people, we don't realize that it's ridiculous. But it's really the same. A plane doesn't fly because it deserves to fly. It flies because it's designed in a very specific way that ensures it is aerodynamic and it has enough power and it's built in a specific way so that it can fly. It has nothing to do with deserving. So deserving is this idea that, again, there is the precondition and it's combined with a should. And then there is the thing that should happen if the precondition is met. But usually it is an oversimplified precondition. So again, the plane doesn't fly because it deserves to fly. It flies actually because there is a precondition. And the precondition is that it is built properly. Now, of course, it's highly complex to describe how the plane should be built, but it's possible. Like on the blueprint, it describes exactly how the plane is built. And if the plane is built to specification, then it's going to fly. So we could almost say that it flies because it deserves to fly, but I'm not sure if deserving implies agency. Maybe, maybe not, but let's not go into that. But instinctively we realize that it doesn't make sense to say that the plane flies because it deserves to fly, unless by deserves we mean the exact specification of the plane. So if we say the plane will fly if it's made like that, or it will not fly if it's not made like that, and this is the blueprint, let's say, then it makes sense. If the plane is built according to the blueprint, it will fly. If it's not built according to the blueprint, it will not fly. So if by deserve we mean the blueprint, then it's correct. But usually by deserve, we mean a simplified version of the blueprint. We don't mean the full blueprint. So what about when we talk about ourselves? So we say someone that has worked hard deserves to make money. But the problem is that the deserve is not the full blueprint. The word deserve is not the full blueprint. It's an oversimplified version of the blueprint. So in this case, it's only looking at the fact that the person worked hard, but maybe he did many mistakes. Maybe he went in the wrong direction. Maybe he did the wrong things. So it didn't work out. But deserves only look at a small piece, like maybe one variable. So if we say the plane looks beautiful, so it will fly, that's stupid. We understand that. Now if we say if the plane is built properly, so if the plane is built in a way that it can fly, it will fly. But that's like an obvious thing. If the plane is built in a way that it flies, then it flies. If the plane is built in a way that it doesn't fly, then it doesn't fly. Now if we say someone does the things that will make him successful and rich, then by definition, by doing those things, he's successful and rich. Because this is kind of the blueprint. It incorporates all the variables. I mean, besides the fact that this is impossible because there will be so many variables, so many uncertainty, so many unpredictability. It's a lot more predictable for a plane to fly than for a human to achieve certain outcomes, because it's much more chaotic, much more complicated. There are much more variables, etc., etc. Beside the point, we are just trying to provide an example, to provide an explanation. So deserving is going to oversimplify reality. It's like the idea of the theory and the practice. So what is the difference between theory and practice? Now, there is a joke which is like, in theory it's the same, but in practice it's different. But that doesn't really help. In reality, the difference between theory and practice is just the number of variables that are taken into account. So the theory takes a limited number of variables. It doesn't take into account all the variables. In the practice, because it's actually in the actual reality, it's an actual experiment, it takes into account all the variables. So someone could say, in theory, if someone works hard, they should be successful. And that's fair enough, because it's just in theory. It only accounts for one variable, working hard enough. So in theory, if someone works hard, they should be successful. But then maybe there are other variables in practice. Let's say the guy is very unlucky, or something goes wrong, or he's working hard but on the wrong thing. Then he will not be successful. So in theory, he will be successful. If you only look at a limited number of variables, he will be successful, but in practice, he will not be. Now, of course, you can add more variables. You can say, if he works hard on the right things, and he's patient enough, and he has the required skill, and is lucky, blah, 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 then he will succeed. Of course, if you include every possible variable, then it becomes like the blueprint of the plane, and then it becomes true. But so what exactly is deserving? It's kind of tricky. It's like we have an intuitive understanding of the word deserving, but we don't really understand what it means. Of course we don't, because it doesn't make any sense. The word deserving has no real equivalent in reality. It's just a story of our imagination. So deserving, again, beside that it doesn't make any sense because it's just something in the imagination, is kind of an attempt to oversimplify reality, which, by the way, is a common theme in the stories. So a lot of the mental conditioning, or the stories we tell ourselves, are the result of an oversimplification. So we reduce the number of variables, we oversimplify, and then we expect that certain conclusions should happen, even if the key parameters are missing. So it's like the idea of theory and practice. So we say in theory, this should happen, but in practice it doesn't. The theory only look at limited number of variables, practice will look at all the variables. Deserving is kind of an expectation that the theory should always become the practice. It's an expectation that it's okay to oversimplify. In some way, when we say a plane flies because it deserves to fly, we are kind of oversimplifying and saying, if it's a plane, it will fly, as in all planes fly. Now, of course, well-designed planes fly, but if you take a piece of wood and you build a plane, it's probably not going to fly, and technically it's still a plane. So it's not that all planes will fly, but well-designed plane will fly. But in order to be well designed, a plane should fit many parameters that ensure that it will fly, or it will just not fly. So if someone maybe makes a small plane out of wood, they could say, in theory it should fly, it's a plane. But in practice it will not fly, because there are many more parameters that have to be met. So by definition, if you meet all the parameters, it's just simple causality. It's if all the parameters for success are met, by definition there is going to be success. If all the parameters for flying are met, by definition there will be flying. The problem is that it's not easy to list all the required parameters. There could be millions of parameters. So we oversimplify, we use theory, we say deserving as in oversimplification. He worked hard, he deserves success. But what is deserving? Deserving is kind of an imagined consequence. So there is the real consequence. He worked hard and he failed because he didn't fit the other parameters, or it's a plane but it doesn't fly because it didn't fit the other parameters beside being a plane. It's not a well-built plane fit for flying. So the deserving can be translated in this. It's like in this expectation that the simplified reality, the theory, the oversimplification should not matter, that it should not matter that it's oversimplified. So he worked hard, he deserved to succeed. It will be translated as he worked hard, he should succeed. He worked hard, he will succeed. But then it's obvious that it's not enough, because if we say he worked hard but he didn't work smart, besides that, then we will even realize that, oh yeah, then he doesn't deserve, because we added something. But when we say he worked hard, it doesn't guarantee that he also worked smart. So why do we feel that if we say he worked hard, he deserves success, and then if you say is different than he worked hard but not smart, he doesn't deserve success. It's the same, because when we said before he worked hard, we didn't specify that he worked smart also. He could have worked smart or not. So why would the success be guaranteed? He worked hard, he deserves success. That means that even if he worked hard and not smart, he deserves success. Or at least he should succeed. Or we expect that he will succeed. But it doesn't, because if he worked hard and not smart, he will not succeed. So the issue with deserving, again, is substituting, replacing the theory for the practice, is assuming that even if with very few variables, it should be equivalent to all the variables. So the plane should fly just because it's a plane. The person should succeed just because he works hard. But then we don't look at maybe the hundreds or the thousands of parameters that are required for a plane to fly or for a person to be successful, and decide that successful could be anything. So what exactly successful mean? But again, those are just examples. So deserving is really problematic. It really twists our mind in so many ways. It implies that something should happen, so that there is an imagined reality where the thing should happen that we compare with the actual reality. But it also adds to it the specific prerequisites. So it's not really just about us. It's not just I broke my leg, but it shouldn't have happened in general. It's more like anyone who meet the prerequisites. So I did that, or anyone that does that deserves this. So it's a should with a kind of generic prerequisite. So if you meet the prerequisite, then this should happen. So whoever meets the prerequisite deserves this outcome. But then the prerequisite is also oversimplified. So it doesn't include all the parameters. So the prerequisite could be anyone that works hard should succeed. But it's oversimplified as in anyone that works hard. It doesn't say anyone that works hard and works on the right thing and is lucky and is patient enough and is knowledgeable what he's doing, blah, 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 deserves. Because at that point, once we describe everything, the word deserves doesn't even make sense. It's obvious that if someone works hard and know what they're doing, are doing the right thing, are going in the right direction, are being patient, are being lucky, blah, 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 then this will happen. So once we have all the details, we don't really say deserves to. We say it will. The person who does A, B, C, D, blah, 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 will succeed. The plane that is done exactly according to that blueprint and point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will fly. We don't say at this point it deserves to fly. So we only use the word deserve when we talk about oversimplification. So the plane should fly. The plane deserves to fly. Of course, it seems stupid for a plane, but it gives the idea. So deserve is very tricky. It's a tricky story. It's more tricky than the should story, because it's a generic should that seems to make sense. Because if I break my leg and I say, oh, that's terrible, I shouldn't have broken my leg, it doesn't feel so true, so absolute. It's like, yeah, I mean, I should, but I shouldn't have broke my leg, but maybe I'm wrong. But when we put it as in people that work hard deserve success, it feels more like an absolute truth. It's more difficult to notice that it doesn't make sense. And the reason is because of the oversimplification. So the deserve word hides the oversimplification, that actually it's not just about working hard, there are other parameters. So in theory, let's say working hard should lead to success, but in practice there are more parameters. Theory is always with less parameters than practice. Theory is always an oversimplification. So in theory, people that work hard deserve success. In theory, the plane deserves to fly. But in practice, you have to add all the parameters. And when you add all the parameters, it looks obvious that the word deserve is stupid, doesn't make sense, so we drop it. So every time we hear the word deserve, we have to remember that it's, again, just a story. It doesn't really exist. We are just imagining a story where we are building a rule that if a certain oversimplified prerequisite is met, then something should happen, but we know it's wrong because it's oversimplified and it's not accounting for many of the required parameters.